December 1st, 1934, the death of Sergei Kirov, close associate of Joseph Stalin, assassinated by Leonid Nikolov. Assassination of Sergei Kirov is what is known to have set off the series of purges led by Stalin. This crime of the century is what made Stalin so paranoid to the point of executing an estimate of 680,000 and arresting more than 1 million. This is what we know as the Great Terror. As Stalin took control of the investigation of Kirov's death, in his mind, this made it clear as ever that there were people out to get him. While this is what set off the Great Terror as we know it, there are other aspects that build up to this mindset of Stalin. Shown here are posters and leaflets that were created before this time with the idea of anti-Stalinism. Another thing that contributed to Stalin's paranoia was the left opposition. From 1923 to 1927, the left opposition was led by Stalin's enemy, Trotsky, and while there isn't time to go into depth, here is the left opposition simplified. The left opposition was formed by Trotsky and his supporters in October of 1923. As they rallied against the Bolshevik Party on a variety of issues, they focused on their goal to reform the Soviet Communist Party policy and to fight for a correct line in the Communist International. The left opposition was destined to fail as the idea of loyalty and opposition was seen to be unable to coexist. It especially went downhill when Trotsky was removed from the War Commissariat in 1925. Political programs of Trotsky were so different from Stalinism and created a conflict between the two. As Trotskyists continued to have that stigma around them, even as they pledged themselves to Stalin, almost all were executed during the Great Terror. But with the actions of Stalin justified, the Great Terror starts with the Moscow trials. The Moscow trials were 3 widely publicized show trials run by Stalin, starting in August of 1936, accusing numerous political figures of plotting against the party and government. The accused were often against Stalin in the past, some were part of the left opposition or were friends with Trotsky. While too many to name were on trial, the most well-known of them all would be the list of Lev Kamenev, who is a prominent member of the Communist Party as well as the Soviet government, and Grigory Zinoviev, who was a central figure in the Communist Party leadership and a Leningrad party leader. While both Kamenev and Zinoviev helped Stalin in preventing Trotsky from becoming Lenin's predecessor, Stalin had turned on them both, causing them to join forces with Trotsky. Kamenev and Zinoviev were on trial with 14 others, accused of plotting against Stalin's life along with other political figures. Karl Radek, an early leader of the Communist International who strongly supported Trotsky before he got banned from the party, he later readmitted as a pro-Stalinist. Georgy Pyatakov, a prominent member of the left opposition, which also got him banned from the party, he readmitted when he took back his opposition, and worked as an industrial administrator until he was arrested. Pyatakov and Radek were both accused of working with Trotsky to overthrow the Soviet government. Radek was sentenced to 10 years while Pyatakov was executed. Bukharin, a prominent leader of the Communist International, as well as a Bolshevik and Marxist theorist. Bukharin strongly supported Lenin and thus was allied with Stalin. Bukharin would even succeed Zinoviev, but as he was later denounced by Stalin, he lost almost all of his political power. While he was partially reinstated by Stalin, he was secretly arrested and expelled for being a quote-unquote Trotskyite. Bukharin was accused of counter-revolutionary activities as well as espionage.
Bukharin is also telling now lies before the court. Bukharin knew of the plan to arrest Lenin, Stalin and Sverdlov, and who knew of such a plan would also have carried it out. Who is prepared to use force is also prepared to commit murder. The plot has been uncovered. The masses demand only one thing: to stamp out this accursed vermin. 50 million people of our great socialist homeland, and want to express our deep thanks to Nikolai Ivanovich Yezhov, the People's Commissar for Internal Affairs and the best comrade of our Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin. He was able to uncover and bring to trial a whole band of murderers and provocateurs from the rightist Trotskyite Bukharin groups as well as from a German group and other fascists.
As Nikolai Ivanovich Yezhov was praised during the time of the trials for bringing these quote-unquote criminals to light, it would be almost 50 years later when the guilty would be found innocent.
The rehabilitation of Bukharin was started last year when a committee headed by Judge Marov examined 100 volumes of evidence from the trial. They concluded there had been a total arbitrariness and total disregard for the law. The process of rehabilitation was threefold: judicial, academic and political. In February 1988, Bukharin's sentence was annulled. In May, his name was restored to the academy, and in June, he was posthumously reinstated to the party. Hundreds of names have now been restored in a massive attempt to recognize and redress the past. As mass graves are being discovered outside Moscow, a vast memorial to those who perished under Stalin's rule is now being planned. But it is the restoration of Bukharin that has had the most impact.
As the convicts have been found innocent after all, it is important to note that Nikita Khrushchev himself admits that the only evidence used against them were the confessions. Along with this fact, Khrushchev also reveals that they were able to get confessions out of the accused through hours of torture.
On the whole, the only proof of guilt actually used against all norms of current legal science was the confession of the accused himself, as subsequent probing has proven confessions were acquired through physical pressures against the accused.
While it is obvious what happened to those executed, convicts that were arrested and sent to prison ended up in concentration camps called gulags. Millions were sent to these camps, often located near Siberia or the Russian Far East. Hundreds of thousands of people died in these gulags due to a variety of extreme conditions, including, but not limited to, starvation, weather, and torture. The gulag started in 1929 and went on to 1953. An interview of a victim that was sent to a gulag in Koloma starting in 1948 talks about her experience. While she wasn't an imprisoned Russian during the Great Terror, her stories can give us an even better vision of what the gulags might have looked like during 1936 to 1938. Forms of torture that Ivana described includes sitting on a hook and against a wall, holding arms above the head, standing up for hours, and sitting in a chair with your feet hanging above the ground as well as a light shining in the face.
Ivana remembers a punishment when prisoners were exhausted, cold and hungry after a day's work. They were forced to lie down face first in the snow and get up again.
I asked, for example, come down and back up, down and up in the snow and back, and snow and the back. It was horrible.
Frostbite was common. There are witness reports of men coming from Kolyma with missing fingers or ears or noses. If prisoners got out of line, they were beaten. Many women were raped. Ivana herself was not, but she knew others who were.
Gulags were diverse in its victims and were around 25% larger than the camps of Nazi Germany. The typical process of a victim was first investigation, then their trial, and getting convicted with quote-unquote special troika. They would lastly be sent to their designated camp. The average sentence was 10 to 25 years, which is significantly higher than the average life expectancy of 2 to 5 years. Those who survived the gulags were shunned from society. The punishments from these arrests extended to family members as well. One example is the children of these families losing voting rights, paying higher taxes, and struggling to find a job or higher their education. While Khrushchev attempted to keep the distrust of the Soviet citizens short-lived through a secret speech denouncing Stalin, it was undone by Brezhnev's praise of Stalin's impressive war efforts. The effects of the Great Terror continues to have an influence on political matters as the quote-unquote crimes of one family member incriminated others by guilt by association. This especially rings true as we see in what the children of the prisoners had to experience. With this, it can be strongly argued that Stalin's impact is intergenerational and that there is a negative correlation between the repressed and the voting turnout. In Stalin's terror and the long-term political effects of mass repression, Yuri Zhukov and Muriel Talibova present charts to prove this analysis. Figure 1, both parts A and B, visualizes this comparison well. Figure 5 demonstrates the percentage of voting turnout with those who were shown amnesty and those not. It is clear that the percentage that didn't receive amnesty has a lower turnout, which supports the claim of a correlation. With that being said, the charts provide a showcase of distrust from the citizens and how the Great Terror continues to influence the Soviet Union today. Overall, the Great Terror was a significant moment in history and something that can be learned from. This purge crossed the frontier of what could happen with an intense amount of paranoia and corrupt power. The actions of Stalin are still reminiscent in the Soviet Union and will stay that way for a long time to come.